Welcome all. Today I thought I'd do an update on the Zeapon Micro 2 slider. I've sort of talked about it a couple of times in passing on a couple of my recent videos, and I sort of covered it probably about a year ago now, prior to getting the actual motor for it. And I thought I'd do a bit of an update on how it actually performs, especially after seeing a few videos on a new slider that is sort of a competitor to this one, the iFootage Shark Nano, I think it's called. And I want to discuss what this can do and make perhaps a few comparisons to the iFootage one so that people have an idea of what they can and can't get. The Zeapon motorised slider is about $6.99 in some Australian stores, if you can get it for less. And the iFootage one I notice in the same store is about $8.99, so $200 odd more for the iFootage one. And the only real operational difference between the iFootage and the Zeapon is that the iFootage actually does a bit of panning while moving the slider backwards and forwards. I'm not too sure exactly what degree of controllability you have, but I think with the mechanism you can sort of make it go faster and slower up to a point. So that's really one of the fundamental differences in operation. However, there are other differences that I'll show shortly to illustrate how I think the Zeapon is significantly better and a better performer overall than the iFootage one is. And if, from what rumours I've heard, are correct, Zeapon is looking at bringing out a pan tilt head for the Micro 2 and the other two versions that it has, the longer ones. And if that's the case, then I think there'd be a very major competitor to pretty much any slider that's around. Now, I did note on the title there that is this possibly the best slider available? I think it's one of the premium sliders as far as quality of operation and that goes. For the money, you could possibly get some better, very, very high-end sliders that will be potentially better, but you're going to be paying a huge amount of money, and I don't think the returns will be anywhere near the value that you just get with the Zeapon itself. So what I'll do now is I'll just show you a very short video clip that I took with the Zeapon in two types of situations, and then I'll show those situations once the video has been played through. So watch that through, it's only very short, and then I'll give you an idea of what you can and can't do, or can do with this versus what you can't do with, say, the iFootage as an example. So watch the video and be back shortly. Okay, back again, and now with the slider as it is at the moment, a couple of points I'd like to raise with the for specifications wise. The slider is able to hold 8 kilograms in the level format that you see now. It's got a 4.1 kilo camera sitting on it, as I've mentioned before, and the control measurement mechanisms is basically an app that allows you 5 different points to control and have variable speeds between each of those points, and you can get that to cycle backwards and forwards as much as you want. So you can just play that and it'll just move of its own, get to the end of the sequence, and then it'll just start going backwards and forwards if you have it on recycle. At the moment I've just got it down on the panning out, and gets to the end and started back. Now what you can see here is that it actually works very, very well. There's almost negligible droop by the time it gets to the end of the slider. I measured it with a spirit level, and I think there was about a 1 degree drop on the heavier side with the motor and that, which is almost negligible when you look at the videos itself. And so it's a very, very solid very solid slider. But I've had to modify the base that it came with and made my own, because that was pretty ordinary, and certainly it would just tip over if you put anything heavy on it. So I've now got that mounted on a very substantial slider or slider base that I made up out of bits and pieces, and it works very well. And I'll just show you what I've done with the video. I'll take this off for the moment. In fact, I'll take it off from both ends. It makes it much easier to handle. Now, one of the things that I mentioned earlier is that I use Arca Swiss clamps and plates exclusively on the slider, and all my gear for that matter, basically because it makes attachment and detaching and modifying on different platforms so much easier. And I've got a little Arca Swiss plate on the bottom of the base, and the reason I've got that there is that because of the fluid head style, you can only get the thing pointing in one direction. You can't have it twisting around without a panning head on it, and I don't want to put one of those things on there. So what I've got is I've just simply put the Arca Swiss plate on top of or underneath the slider mount itself, and then the slider sits on another Arca Swiss clamp on top of that mounting system, and then there's a further one up there. So what I can do, it starts looking very ungainly, and it is now getting to be quite a heavy situation there. One reason why I've got this Benro S8 fluid head, because it can carry up to 8 kilos, so anything smaller, and when you start doing things like this, and the other one that I'll show you shortly, is going to be a real problem. Now, the video that I just played, the first sequence was done in this fashion, with the camera and everything else mounted the way it is. And I'll just get back my app, and basically what I did was move the slider backwards and forwards at a bit of an angle, and that worked extremely well. There were no real dramas with that at all. Solid mounting points with the Arca Swiss clamps just makes the whole thing just completely different and functional. So the only thing I think with the Zeapon app, it keeps jumping around. Okay, stop that, and I'll take my camera off again. Makes for a little bit easier handling and changing. And take that off. And the slider. So what I did for the second shot was mount the slider in that fashion. Put the camera on and had it pointing in that way. And I think I had it down a fair bit more, if you can see that, around about that sort of an angle. And then played the app once more. So I just played it backwards and forwards a couple of times just to get a shot. And absolutely no problems there at all. That's 4.1 kilos on the slider itself, and it'll do about 5 kilos apparently on a vertical position. So add a ball head or anything like that, and you've probably got your 5 kilos coming up fairly quickly with that. If you're going to have a ball head that's going to be able to hold a camera of that weight. But this works really well. Now, you can't do anything like this with the iFootage, which is really not mentioned at all in any of the videos. It has a 3.5 kilo maximum capacity when it's on a horizontal platform like that, and only 2.5 kilos, I believe, if it's tilted. Oh, sorry, not tilted, but just put onto a fluid head. So when you mount the iFootage, for example, on some legs off the ends of the slider, it's got a 3.5 kilo capacity, but if you mount it off the centre to get the full extension, it's only 2.5 kilos. This will do 8 kilos on full extension from one end to the other and 5 kilos up and down. So that's something that hasn't been mentioned in a few of the reviews, and I just wanted to bring this out as to the actual capability and capacity of a slider versus some features such as the panning while it's in motion, which you may find that important, you may not, but if you don't need that as an imperative and you want to use heavy cameras, the Zeapon Micro 2 is excellent. The physical size of the slider itself is excellent as well because it's nice and short, but I believe it now has a 600 and an 800mm to complement the 300mm slider, so you get a much greater range. But I think you start getting into problems with the long ones when it comes to full extension if you've got it on a fluid head. But I just wanted to sort of go into a little bit more detail with the slider as far as that goes, especially now that I've got the motor and can do these sorts of motions, which I couldn't do before. I thought it'd be good to do a heads up on a product that's been around for a little while now and often gets neglected as new products come onto the scene. So for anybody who's considering a slider, I'd absolutely recommend the Zeapon Micro 2. It's just brilliant. The quality of manufacture and everything else is superb. Very little to fault with it, and as I pointed out before, the only thing that I found to be problematic was the stand that it came with that I had to sort of rebuild myself. That wasn't hard to do anyway if you're handy at DIY. But from this sort of perspective, it's a brilliant slider, and it'll be interesting to see what happens if they bring out the panning head or the pan tilt head, as I suspect that they're going to do, and how much sort of capacity that's going to have. And I think it's going to match in with the app that they've already designed, because I have a feeling that it's got those sort of features built into it already. So that's it for the moment, and hope that was informative, and I'll see you later. Cheers.